At the start of the 2022-23 season, Liverpool and Manchester City faced off in the Community Shield. It was billed as the battle of the league's most exciting new strikers, Darwin Núñez and Erling Haaland. Despite not starting, Núñez came off the bench to score Liverpool's third goal in a 3-1 victory. And Haaland? Well, his defining moment in that match was this. The social media storm that followed had one overarching question behind it. Was Haaland actually a fraud? Would he be another example of this apparent Bundesliga tax? Well, we all know how that's gone. Erling Haaland has gone on to score over 50 goals in his first season in England. That mistake in the Community Shield is long forgotten because he's become the greatest goal scorer in Premier League history in a single season. But here's the thing, despite scoring more goals than games played, Haaland has actually had some shocking misses. And in the 48 games that he's played for City, he's actually not scored in 17 of those games, around 35%. So what's the point here? Well, Erling Haaland knows that deep down, mistakes are part of the numbers game. In sport, you have to grow comfortable with the fact that mistakes are just inevitable. There will be times where you embarrass yourself or let yourself and your teammates down. But the problem is, so many of us grow fearful of making mistakes. We fear the consequences of misplacing a pass, missing an easy shot, or kicking too soon in a running race. And because of this, we end up playing it way too safe. But the reality is, if we're too afraid to take risks, then we won't necessarily do anything amazingly bad in our sport, but we also won't do anything amazingly good either. You can just become a passenger and get into a pattern of playing or performing averagely game after game. Let's talk through an example. Say we've got two attacking midfielders. Midfielder A tries two ambitious forward passes, and on both occasions they're slightly too long, and the striker ends up moaning at them a bit. So the midfielder ends up having their confidence knocked. They become fearful of making any more mistakes and giving away possession. So for the rest of the half, they play it safe, and they make 18 out of their next 18 passes, but they're all backwards. And then there's midfielder B. He also tries two ambitious long forward passes, and on both occasions they're slightly too long as well. And again, the striker moans at him, but he doesn't necessarily mind. And in the rest of the half, he tries three more of those passes, two of which actually reach the striker, and on one occasion, the striker ends up scoring from it. And for the rest of this half, midfielder B also makes 6 out of 8 sideways passes, and also 7 out of 7 backwards passes. In that half, both midfielders tried 20 passes, and midfielder A had a pass accuracy rate of 90%, and midfielder B had a pass accuracy rate of 75%. But who's the more effective player? The point is, mistakes are going to be part of anyone's numbers. But in letting those mistakes get to you, you can adjust your game in a way that at face value seems more effective, but actually does nothing useful for you or the team. So how do you become like midfielder B and someone like Erling Haaland, who just doesn't allow mistakes to affect his in-game confidence? Well, tip number 1 of conquering your fear of making mistakes is to just focus on the present moment. Once a mistake is made, it is in the past. It's done. That moment is gone and you're not getting that chance again. So if you let your brain stay on that moment, you're going to grow frustrated, angry, and even ashamed of yourself. You lose your head because it's no longer focused on the here and now, which means more mistakes are going to be more likely. But someone like Haaland, as much as people joke he's like a robot, his thinking sometimes is. Just like a robot, Haaland is solely focused on the objective of the here and now. Robots lock onto their target and will do everything in their power to just complete this objective. Sometimes robots and computers freeze though, or get caught in a boot loop, and that's what you're doing if you dwell on your mistakes. So what do you do when a computer freezes? Well, you hit the reset button. And that's exactly what you should do when you make a mistake. I've spoken about this before, but a reset button is just basically any act that allows you to mentally detach from a situation and start afresh. It can be a physical act like untying and retying your shoelaces again, or it can be using a self-talk mantra like get the next one or move on. The goal is to use this as a symbolic moment to shift your perspective back to the present moment when you feel tempted to stay in the past and focus on the mistake you've made. Doing this just wipes the slate clean and reduces that fear of making any more mistakes. Like a robot, you want to attach no feelings to your actions. Don't feel, just do. But I get it, sometimes we make a lot of mistakes, and if we keep having to hit the reset button, it might get jammed and not work anymore. So what do you do in those situations where your performance is just absolutely riddled with mistakes? Well, let me take you back to the Australian Open in 2016. It's the 4th round and world number 1 Novak Djokovic is up against world number 15 Gilles Simon. Djokovic had won 9 of the previous 10 matches against his opponent, but was taken to 5 sets by the Frenchman. Despite this, Djokovic managed to hold on to victory. But there was something truly unique about this victory, because throughout the match, Djokovic racked up 100 unforced errors, which are the literal definition of a mistake in tennis. Making that many errors in a match is almost unheard of, and 99% of the time, someone who makes that many errors would lose the match. So Djokovic got lucky. He knew it was pretty much a miracle that he managed to get through to the quarterfinals, but he knew that he had to eliminate those errors from his game if he was to win this title that he was favourite for. And he managed just that. He dispatched Japan's Kei Nishikori in the quarterfinals in straight sets, and then cruised past Roger Federer in 4 sets in the semi-final. and then went on to beat Andy Murray in straight sets in the final, during which he only made 41 unforced errors. So how did Djokovic in the space of a week more than half the number of mistakes he was making? Because for most athletes, making 100 mistakes in one performance would shatter their confidence and cause all kinds of self-doubt to creep in. Well, for Djokovic, he understood that part of conquering the fear of mistakes is realizing that mistakes enhance growth. The world's best at any sport get to the top in realizing that mistakes at the end of the day are nothing more than feedback. Mistakes are simply information. Information that tells you that something is not quite right or working, and that something needs to change. But here's the thing, they also believe they have the power to make that change. They don't see mistakes and the failure that sometimes comes with them as final. They see them as opportunities to learn. And in order to do that, they turn to tip 2. Which is to adopt a growth mindset. A growth mindset is simply the belief that you can develop your skills and talents through hard work, the right strategies, and guidance from others. This contrasts with a fixed mindset, where you think your skills and talents are unable to change, and that if you make mistakes or lose, it's because you're not good enough and there's nothing you can do about it. And look, the more mistakes you make, the easier it becomes to adopt that fixed mindset. But what the likes of Djokovic and other world-class performers do is that they ensure they maintain a growth mindset through a strong commitment to deliberate practice. This is where your practice is super focused on specific goals that have been shaped by feedback that you've received, and also that pushes you outside your existing comfort zone. So for Djokovic, after his 100 unforced error match, he sat down with his coach to review the match to get feedback on why he was making so many errors. And so with this feedback, he made sure that before the remaining rounds of the tournament, his practice was super focused on these things. He adjusted his training to go through similar scenarios where he made some of these 100 errors and correct them through working on areas him and his coach had identified. So if you have a performance that's particularly riddled with mistakes, just realize that these mistakes are nothing more than information. And that's information that you can use to actually develop and grow your game. A growth mindset is one of the best things that you can develop to remain confident despite making mistakes. But look, let's be honest, sometimes our mistakes can be really costly, and they not only let ourselves down, but also let down our entire team, or in the most extreme cases, can let down an entire country. So how do you even begin to get over that, and all the fear that consumes you from making serious mistakes? Well, let's talk about David Beckham. In 1998, Beckham was riding high. He was one of the best young players in the country and was becoming a global name as a celebrity and not just a footballer. But at the World Cup that year, in the round of 16 between England and Argentina, he made the fatal mistake of kicking Diego Simeone right under the nose of the referee. The score at the time was 2-2 and England eventually were dumped out of the competition on penalties. Because of his red card, Beckham became public enemy number 1. His stupid mistake cost his country, and for a few years he was bombarded with abuse from the press and rival fans when he played for Manchester United. But in 2000, Beckham was made captain of England. And Beckham saw this moment as a fresh start. It was his opportunity to pay back for his error at the World Cup. And in 2001, he did just that, with one of the most memorable moments in English football history, when he scored an injury-time free kick to send England to the 2002 World Cup. But the interesting thing was that in this match, this was not the first free kick Beckham had taken. He had already taken 5 or 6 pretty poor attempts. But what allowed Beckham to keep going despite making these mistakes was that since being made England captain, he had actually engaged in tip number 3 of conquering the fear of mistakes: undergoing an identity shift. The mistake he made against Argentina had been terrible for him, but he actually ended up using it as a turning point. After that moment, he made a promise to himself that he would never let his country down in the same way. So that's when he began practicing his famous free kick technique more than ever. Part of Beckham knew deep down he would be relied upon in a big moment one day, and he wanted to be completely unfazed by that moment. He would not let his past mistakes play on his mind to fuel future mistakes. So for hours and hours each week, he would practice his free kicks, repetition after repetition. Each free kick helped morph this new identity of going from immature pretty boy to reliable and responsible leader. The easy thing would have been for him to let the mistake define him and end his career. But Beckham knew deep down this was an opportunity. Whether he realised it or not, he actually worked through what psychologists call your ABCs. A is the activating event, so for Beckham getting sent off against Argentina. What follows then is the beliefs that you develop about this event, and then subsequent to that, the consequences that come from those beliefs. So if after making his mistake, Beckham started believing that he was a disgrace and his career would be over, then the consequences would be that he would stop training hard. He would be fearful in matches of making more mistakes, and gradually he would have faded away into an average player. But instead, Beckham's beliefs were not negative. He knew that he'd let his country down, but he believed he could make it right. He knew he had to change who he was and grow up. He had to become a man and grow into a stronger person. He just didn't know how to do this at the time. And the consequences of this was that he upped his work rate and did not shy away from all the abuse he suffered. He made a conscious decision to still take corners every game for Man United, even if opposition fans would abuse him and throw stuff at him. He knew more mistakes were a possibility when playing for club and country, but he did not let such a big one erode his confidence. He knew taking this approach could give him the potential to become England captain and eventually face a career-defining moment like that free kick against Greece. So the next time you make a mistake, work through your ABCs. The activating event is the mistake, and that's something unfortunately you can't change. But if you change your beliefs and see it as an opportunity to reinvent yourself, then the consequences are that the fear of making mistakes will no longer control you. and instead you will be able to conquer any challenge that you face in future. And if you want another technique that will help you start learning from your mistakes, then check out this next video here.